Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of React Roundup. I am your host today, Paige Niedringhouse, and I am joined by our panelists, TJ Van Tol.
Hey, everybody.
And Jack Harrington.
Hello there.
And our special guest today is Mickey Petersen. Welcome, Mickey.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Mickey, why don't you give our listeners a little bit about yourself, why you're famous, and what we're going to talk about today on the podcast?
Sure. I can start off with saying I'm a Swede in the Netherlands. Me and my boyfriend recently relocated to Amsterdam from having been in Stockholm for quite a few years. I am a previous flight attendant, turned lawyer, turned web developer, and that's sort of my interesting story, I guess, on how it all happened. And I wrote a short article about 3JS, which is a sort of 3D graphics framework and how to connect it up with your React framework basically out of the box. And I don't really know how to move forward from that.
I mean, that's totally fine. So let's put a pin in how you got into web development, because that is a very atypical career path or entree.
There will be questions asked, yes.
But I'd love to hear more about working with Canvas and WebGL, because it's something that I'm vaguely familiar with, but I've never really done it either with or without React. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you would use that kind of thing for and how to get started with it.
Of course.
Hey, folks, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been working on actually building out Top End Devs. If you're interested, you can go to topenddevs.com/podcast, and you can actually hear a little bit more about my story, about why I'm doing what I'm doing with Top End Devs, why I changed it from devchat.tv to Top End Devs. But what I really want to get into is that I have decided that I'm going to build the platform that I always wished I had with devchat.tv, and I renamed it to Top End Devs because I want to give you the resources that are going to help you to build the career that you want, right? So whether you want to be an influencer in tech, whether you want to go and just max out your salary and then go live a lifestyle with your family, your friends, or just traveling the world or whatever, I want to give you the resources that are going to help you do that. We're going to have career and leadership resources in there, and we're going to be giving you content on a regular basis to help you level up and max out your career. So go check it out at topenddevs.com. If you sign up before my birthday, that's December 14th. If you sign up before my birthday, you can get 50% off the lifetime of your subscription. Once again, that's topenddevs.com.
Primarily, I think it's a fun tool to use to make animations and to make whatever website you have a bit more interactive. That is canvases. What the issue is, I think, or what might be confusing is when working with React, and especially when working with props and canvases and maybe user input, it re-renders, right? That's sort of what React does. It re-renders on every user input. This in turn, of course, affects the canvas. So I think that's where a lot of users and beginners sort of get confused, since you're both working with a framework who keeps updating your DOM, right? And meanwhile, you also want to update a canvas, which is like a little ref in your DOM.
Yeah, because Canvas it's not like SVG where it's got a bunch of subtags, like sub-elements in it. It's literally just the one canvas, and then you get a context, and you got some draw things. You can draw a line in the context. You can draw a circle, and it's got all the primitives in it.
Precisely. Unlike SVGs, it is exactly what the tag says it is. It is a canvas that you can paint on, right?
It's very high performance, actually. I think one of the company I was talking to, they were using it specifically because of incredibly high performance.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not using Safari, they have some sort of bug going with them where the canvas just keeps updating and taking up more and more memory until your web page basically dies, which is also like an issue working with React that wants to sort of throw away the old canvas, get in a new canvas, throw away that canvas and get in a new canvas, and eventually you fill up the memory in the browser, and all of a sudden your website is not working as good as you thought it would.
So I haven't worked with WebGL or 3JS, but I have worked with Canvas in the sense that it's typically used for things like maps. So Mapbox, Leaflet. And one thing that I ran into when I was building a map using a Next.js application was that I had to do a specific type of import where it wasn't being imported on the component wasn't being imported on the server side. It had to be rendered on the client side because apparently that is how Canvas works, which makes sense, I guess, when you think about it, because it's not going to exist where there is no window for it to attach to. But that was kind of an interesting little interaction to me, or something that I didn't know about Canvas when I first started playing with it inside of the context of React. But was there a particular use case that you were looking to solve when you started getting involved with this kind of stuff, Mickey?
Yeah, for sure it was. I was basically looking to make a cool background to my website that was a bit interactive, you know?
Excellent.
The best.
Maybe not very sophisticated use case, but more the fun, because that gives you sort of the opportunity to experiment a bit more with it. And I think as I write about in the article, 3JS is a good place to start because it has functions that allow you to sort of attach it and reference it in the DOM when you're working with your different, what do you call them, the effect hooks, right? Mm-hmm. Which makes it easier to implement them into your React framework. I was just very recently trying to attach P5, which is another. It's not 3D necessarily, but it's a Canvas framework as well, built in JavaScript. Very nice, very much fun to be had with it. And it doesn't have the same function that allows you to attach it and detach it and reference it. So working with it made it a lot harder. Probably the next article will be about how to attach that and work with that in React, because it was I had to scratch my head quite a lot to get it to work.
Yeah, it's like an entirely different thing. It's like getting D3 and React to work together. They're just entirely different.
So is there some fun thing to the name P5 that I missed? Because D3 it's kind of like 3D backwards, right? Like, so is there some is there some sort of like clever thing to P5 that I'm just not smart enough that I'm not figuring out?
I bet there is, but I'm unaware of it.
Okay. Just seems like such a random name.
Well, yeah,
I agree.
Actually, what is P5 doing for you? I'm sort of perusing their website because I'm kind of curious because I don't have a lot of experience in this space.
So I think P5 is quite a good framework to start out with if you want to start with, and you have to excuse my pronunciation of this, kinetic text. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Kinetic. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you sort of want to play around with like titles or like cool logos or images and make, those really cool like wavy effects that some websites have, that's a really good framework to use for it because it's fairly small and very easy to use. Unless you're using React, that is, which makes it a bit more complicated.
Yeah, did it have a physics engine in it? Is that how it comes from? Or is that where the kinetics come from? Or is it
I would assume so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, cool. It looks like there's all sorts of APIs around like acceleration, like there's like P acceleration XYZ, move threshold. So kind of interesting stuff.
And I think the fun thing about like when you work with P5, for example, it's easier to just start off in a vanilla JavaScript project and sort of work with it from there and then slowly move it in towards React. You don't get the nice like auto updating features and stuff that you get with like Create React app and stuff like that. But I think just from a performance and designing perspective, it might be easier. I think they even have an editor on their website that you can just use through your browser.
Well, you mentioned earlier that React makes using some of these things around Canvas a little bit harder. Could you maybe go into like details about that? Like what specifically is it that makes React like trickier to integrate with this, and how do you sort of handle that situation?
Yeah, for sure. So we know that React re-renders on prop updates, right? So when we get some user input, or like if we've attached a scroll listener to the window or the body of our page and sort of attach it to our canvas, we know that React is going to wanting to update that component every time we get a new input. So for example, for a scrolling listener, it would update more or less all the time. So quite intense.
Yep.
So with certain frameworks, depending on how they're attached to React, it triggers a re-render, and that might cause the canvas to actually be detached from the DOM and then attached again very, very quickly. So with some frameworks, you'll see that there's a flicker when you do this. This was the issue I was having with P5, as I explained earlier. So you're going into this which I feel like is a perpetual challenge with React, on what render am I? So when you're working with user input, you sort of have to plan ahead for how am I going to work with the props? How am I going to update my scene? For example, 3JS provides a reference to the canvas, which in turn causes it not to update on every render, but it forces you to have to think a bit more about, say I made a green cube on my canvas and I want my user to click a button and it turns red. How do I handle that? Because I have to programmatically go into the scene, remove my green cube and attach my red cube. So there's a next level render to the canvas as well.
Yeah, so just to understand the high level problem. So basically, I get way into this. I need my website to have a really cool background effect, right? So I create some really cool wavy animations. But then if I do something else on my site that causes a re-render, essentially that wavy animation will just suddenly reset more or less, right? Because the canvas gets re-rendered. So I need to use ref around that is sort of, if I'm understanding the high level problem, is that more or less right?
Yep. Basically, it's tricking React into thinking that this is a prop you don't need to update. So what I usually do is I wrap my state in a use ref, or I use the current key for whatever prop I'm using, and then I wrap my component in a use memo, so it sort of understands that this prop we're not gonna re-render because of that.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So, right. Use state, the difference between use state and use ref is that use state will force the re-render when you change the state, and use ref, you just have that current, you make the current whatever you want, and it doesn't actually do anything when you make that change. Yeah.
Yeah. Since, so far as I understand it, React doesn't compare, it compares them shallowly. So it'll look at your use ref and it will only see it's an object. Whereas your prop that you're sort of using is on the current property of that object, right?
The ref is constant.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to 3GL, is that just an upgraded canvas? Is that, you have a canvas and then you say, cool, I want you to be a 3GL canvas now, and you start doing, how do you create a 3GL canvas? And what's the difference?
I don't really know. I don't really know a 3GL at all.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had also done some work with the 3GL 3D stuff. Okay.
Oh, no. Unfortunately, I haven't.
That's something you might want to try out and get into. It's actually really
cool. Definitely.
Another cool thing you can add to your website.
Right.
Yeah, we all know that when you get to the 3D background effects, that's when your website is really cool. That's the next level. Yeah. Personally, when I do interviews, if someone doesn't have, if they just are in 2D effect land, I just kind of move right on. It's just
it is funny that you mentioned that D3. I never heard that D3 was 3D backwards. And the funny thing is, I never see 3D stuff in D3. It's always, kind of flat visualizations of charts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. This is how COVID is doing, or, whatever, that kind of thing. So yeah, actually, Mickey, have you done anything with these Canvas skills and these and this P5 stuff in the kind of professional context?
No, unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to use them. It would be cool though. So I'm sort of waiting for the next cool product to pop up where I can actually use them a bit more.
What have you worked on in terms of professional work with your React skills?
It's mainly websites for clients. So with blogs and some links and an about me page, and sort of what I feel is the standard for most freelance webs out there.
Yeah, you can still do some cool background effects and stuff on those for sure.
Oh no, for sure. I think my favorite thing that I recently discovered was animating stuff with React Transition Group.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. The stuff you can do with it, especially in combination with it's a React Spring library.
There are a bunch of good ones out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Motion, Spring, yeah.
React Spring has a really cool icon too, or a really cool logo.
That's another way you got to judge your framework.
That's
coolness of their logo.
The important thing.
It sucked me in.
Yeah. Although the coolest logo ever has to go to Zustand with a bear playing banjo. That's a good one.
I haven't even seen that one.
Oh yeah, I'll put a link in the description for you.
Yeah, if you like state management libraries, this is another one that can go up against Redux and Jotai and all the other. You pick the framework, it will exist.
Oh, that's cool.
But it's very, if you're into Redux, it follows that model. So a lot of the Redux crew have been like, oh, I just want Redux, but I want let's boilerplate. And so you end up going with Zustand.
Zustand sounds very firm and solid.
Yes.
Right. I think it's German for state. Basically, people were going and building state managers and then looking for different languages, and they're like, oh, what is state in this language? What is state in that language? And so Zustand is I think like German for like the actual like government, the state, or something like that. I don't know. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, we're running out of English words on NPM to use, so we're gotta branch out a little bit here. Yeah.
When I first did a video on it, I was taken down by a bunch of like German folks saying like, "You are pronouncing it the wrong way." Yeah, I'm like Zustand. They're like, no, it's not.
Zustand.
Speaking of transitions and animations. I think Svelte is a really cool framework. I know it's not React, but it's like one of the few frameworks I know that comes with built-in transitions and animations.
Yeah, I haven't used Svelte personally, but I've heard a lot of good things about it in terms of the fact that it seems to come a lot more with batteries included, or a lot of the cruft that people complain about with React kind of cut out, but all the best parts left in. And I think TJ has worked with it before, so he might be able to speak a little bit more to it.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't know that animations were built in as well. I had to look that up, but I like that Svelte seems like a lot of these things, like it has a more opinionated way of doing CSS, for example, that I kind of appreciated versus like the Wild West of React. So we'll see if it it feels like it's been gaining momentum, but gaining momentum very slowly. So I'm kind of curious whether like we're going to be rebranding this podcast a year from now or not, right? It sort of depends on how things play out.
Yeah, when SvelteKit came out, SvelteKit is like next, but for Svelte. That's when it really started. Like people were like, oh wow, Svelte, let's do this. This is great. I think for all you nascent framework creators out there, if you're going to go build the next great React or the next great whatever, come out with the next as well. Come out with a framework and then come out with the web part as well, other than like the make pages and all that thing. Because that's what people are really looking for, is they're looking for kind of like the combo there of like the whole routing thing and everything else.
Well, Vercel just hired Rich Harris, right? The guy behind Svelte. So apparently they're thinking along the same lines.
Yeah, they're trying not to be the React company.
Yeah, they're just using their however many millions of dollars to hire everybody. That's their solution.
But Mickey, Svelte would help you with your rendering problem. Like it doesn't have the same cycle like that. It does. It doesn't do VDOM to DOM. It's granular updates. So they're not. Yeah. It's not going to try and rebuild the canvas every time just because the props changed. It's going to know like, unless you change something on that thing, I'm just going to leave it there, and then you're free to do with it whatever you want with it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
that's sort of what I like with it. I've had the opportunity to work with Svelte as well. I just think it's such a low threshold to like start coding, whereas like with React you have to understand like what happens in the render and like what update am I on and side effects, and before it was lifecycle methods and stuff like that, whereas with Svelte it's very straightforward.
Yeah, the other thing I like about Svelte is that it also feels a lot like React. It's like React with like you're just like one step down complexity wise, more or less. So the templates, I mean, there's trivial syntactical differences, but for the most part, it feels like the same. You're just writing the same thing. And if there are minor syntactical differences, it's just like a quick Google search away, and you're on your way. So it just feels like you're writing the same thing, but just with a little less complexity, which is always nice.
And it was 20 minutes in the podcast when it became the Svelte podcast.
Yeah.
Half the people have used it, half haven't.
Yeah. I mean, have you seen their website? It's like super cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's got all the animations.
Right.
So, Mickey, I am curious because I want to kind of go back to it. How did you go from flight attendant to lawyer to web developer? Those are some pretty different careers that you've had.
Yeah, people used to think so already when I'd gone from being a flight attendant to a lawyer. So I guess it's been a journey. I think as far as like web development goes, I've coded since I was like 8 or 9, I think. Not that it makes me any good at it at all. It's just that, I sort of remember still when you used to do layouts in iframe tags and like the marquee tag was like still working and super cool.
Yeah,
I wish they would take it back.
Oh, no.
It's not supported by like any browser anymore as far as I'm aware. It's so bad. So like it's always been with me by my side, and it's much thanks to my mom because, you know, back in the 90s, she was like, oh yeah, computers and coding, that seems to be like the future. I used to do some HTML classes. So she came home and she took these classes in the evenings and came home and taught me what she had learned during the evenings. So we built like, right?
Awesome.
Right.
So cool. Shout out to her.
Yeah, big time.
And yeah, and then like I had to grow up like everyone else and get a job. I was casually coding on the side and doing my little CSS things, but didn't really understand this JavaScript thing and thought it was just like a temporary.
Yeah, it wasn't going to stick
what do you call
around.
It's a fad.
Yeah. A fad. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. My like teenage self thought that, you know, weird.
This computer stuff will never last.
No, it's like the facts.
So you decided that the airlines were never going to go away. Like there's never going to be any kind of global pandemic that was going to cause airlines to not go away.
I mean, that wasn't my first thought, at least. I can say easily. Also, given that this was maybe 10 years ago or so, or 12 by now. No, so I became a flight attendant, mainly because I had the option to do it and it seemed like a super cool job to like travel the world and, you know, walk around in cool uniforms and it paid quite well as well. So I really enjoyed those years. But after having done so many flights, I sort of got tired of serving coffee and tea and dealing with rowdy customers. So I decided it's time to get an education, and I became a lawyer, which when I say it sounds super easy, but it was almost 5 years of law school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I came out and became a lawyer. I started working for a law firm, working with financial regulation, which you can sort of hear doesn't sound super exciting, even though it is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. But I realized that my passion is sort of in between problem solution and like creativity as well. So like while my law career gave me a lot of problems to solve and it didn't really provide the creative outlet that I find that coding does, because coding is sort of I guess for most front-end devs at least, sort of a creative outlet as well, where you can like create stuff with CSS and canvases and, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, after a couple of years, I just decided that no, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'm gonna give web development my all instead.
So did you actually go back to school for web development, or did you just take the skills that you'd already kind of built up for fun and, you know, start applying for jobs?
Well, first of all, it was sort of a face slap to be like, JavaScript is still around and it hasn't evolved. It's still there. So I realized I was like lacking 15, 20 years of experience from having done it when I was a kid. So I started doing these boot camps. So actually I started out with the one called Super High. I don't know if you heard about them. No. I think their goal is basically like provide a educational environment, but online, so available for everyone. Fairly cheap prices for their courses. They're sort of also in that in-between threshold between designing and creativity and coding. So a lot of their courses are like, creative coding, make your kinetic typing, for example, was something I learned from them.
Yeah.
And lately I've been doing a full stack open course with Helsinki University. So basically teaching you, you know, some more advanced React and Redux and GraphQL queries together with backend. So it's all based on the Node.js framework and testing and stuff. So I'm almost done with that.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that you have to do with agencies, I guess. Not usually a big back-endy kind of space, but
no.
Other folks, other places. Yeah, for sure. That's good skills, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like learning new stuff on my spare time. And I figured like if you're a front-end dev, you might as well have a little look and see what happens in the back end and see if that might be interesting as well.
Time is of the essence when identifying and resolving issues in your software. And our friends at Raygun are here to help. Their brand new alerting feature is now available for crash reporting and real user monitoring to make sure you're quickly notified of the errors, crashes, and front-end performance issues that matter most to you and your business. Set thresholds for your alert based on an increase in error count, a spike in load time, or new issues introduced in the latest deployment, along with custom filters that give you even greater control. Assign multiple users to ensure the right team members are notified, with alerts linked directly to the issue in Raygun, taking you to the root cause faster. Never miss another mission-critical issue in your software again. Try Raygun Alerting today and create a world-class issue resolution workflow that gives you and your customer peace of mind. Visit raygun.com to learn more. Their simple usage plans start from as little as $4 per month with unlimited apps and users. That's raygun.com to start your free 14-day trial.
Yeah, you never know. And it could be, even if you don't end up using it too much, just being able to understand what the back-end team is working on is always a bonus, or being able to talk to them about what they're working on.
Yeah, for sure.
I gotta say, the one skill that you probably learned in both being a flight attendant and also being a lawyer is the one skill that's probably the most important for every engineer, which isn't a technical skill, which is the ability to communicate clearly and succinctly about what needs to be done right now. Like, you need to get out of the plane right now. You need to, like, here's this tax form. You need to sign right here. Like, it's very succinct, very clear. And I think a lot of folks, like in engineers, like they come in like, oh, it doesn't work. Like, no, that's not the way an engineer would say that it doesn't work. They would say, this is what the problem is. This is what I was expecting. This is what, So with that communication, I think you probably had those communication skills in spades because of that background.
Oh, no, definitely. And also just working with, I think it's easy to forget that even though you're working with computers and it's coding and stuff, like at the end of the day, you're a team. You need to like make it work as a team, and you're working with people all around you at the end of the day. So just those, for sure. Yeah, but I feel like also, that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people also, that's sort of why they enjoy it, because it's, you talk with people and you discuss it and you meet new people. And I mean, that's half the enjoyment of working, in my opinion.
Except if another dev tells you to get my coffee, you're like, nah, that's not. You get your own coffee.
I've served enough coffees in my lifetime. Thank you, sir.
I do feel like that's like a running theme of this show that's come up several times, because we've had lots of guests that have come from other backgrounds that weren't traditional software backgrounds. We've had Paige has talked extensively on this as well. So I think, like, for anybody listening to this too, you shouldn't view that as a barrier to getting into software development. If anything, you should view it as a positive, because you'd be amazed at how much just being productive in some sort of work environment, how much of that can translate into a software development career. Because sure, you might not know the syntax of how to call some random JavaScript function, but you can look that up. You can figure that out. The hard-earned experience of just holding down a career, working with people, working on a team, that's stuff that you kind of need to learn the hard way, one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting you say that as well, because I know, like, when I was in between sort of being a lawyer and becoming a developer, I kept seeing parallels between like being a developer and law. You wouldn't think that they're there because they're so different, but there definitely are similarities between it. Like in law, at least in Sweden, where like I studied, everyone says like, oh no, you don't need to know the law itself. You just need to know how to get the knowledge and interpret it and understand it and use it, right? And it's the same with coding, I feel. You need to understand the basics, but then it's all about solving the problems and finding the solutions.
Yeah, that's it, is that you don't need to memorize much of anything really nowadays. You can just look it up if you know how to ask the right questions and figure it out kind of from what other people have written online, or in your case, in law books or previous verdicts and things like that.
I think being good at Googling is something, if you are good at Googling, you should put on your CV, because it'll help you in any profession.
Well, even like when we were talking about Canvas earlier, I mean, we weren't asking about specific APIs because no one's going to remember that. And B, like we would just trust if people are interested in this, right? That's the first thing they're going to do is look that up and try to figure that out. It's more, you're interested more in the higher level concerns, at least initially.
Mm-hmm. So I am curious, Mickey, you said you were building kind of side projects or little fun things as you were going through being a flight attendant and then being a lawyer. What kind of like extra stuff were you doing? A lot of people point to like they had bands or they had MySpace pages or whatever, but was there like a particular thing that you were really using your HTML and CSS skills for that kind of drew you or kept you interested in it after all this time?
I can't really say that happened at the same time as I was a flight attendant. No, not really. I think I sort of had forgotten all about HTML and CSS and JavaScript by that time. But definitely after I started working, because as a student, you're so preoccupied with your, school books and reports, and you're reading this and you're reading that. But when I started working, I realized that my tech skills and just like understanding computers was sort of it benefited me a lot compared to my peers. So just understanding like, okay, what's the difference? Like, how do I use a PC compared how do I use a Mac? Like, what can I do with Word? Not really tech related as in coding, but very much tech related as in like, I understand what an operating system is. I know the difference between a server and a database.
Right, exactly. It's not magic. And I think a lot of folks, who aren't coders, they look at computers and they do magical things, right? And they're like, I don't know, I expect them to kind of be able to do this magic for me. And it's like, it's not going to do that. Not magic. Like you put inputs in, you get outputs out. Not really. Still,
I feel like all the marketing, marketing departments keep on using the words automagically. Every time I read it, I'm just thinking there's a pissed off coder behind that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, we fell into that trap, or my old team did when I worked for Home Depot, because we used Java Spring Boot, and Spring Boot is the most automagical framework I've ever encountered for Java. And I know it's not, but man, you just added some annotations to some code and suddenly things were wired up and working, and I still have no idea what was going on behind the scenes, but just glad that it compiled and it ran. So yeah, I get it.
It has a certain catch to it as well.
It does.
Yeah. Yep. As long as you don't need to tweak it, then it'll do it.
Right. If you can get around it and not have to debug it, you'll be fine.
Right. Exactly.
So, Mickey, what are you working on right now, or what are some things that are new and interesting to you that you want to dig into more? P5, it sounds like, is something that you may have just gotten recently acquainted with, but is there something else on the horizon that is really exciting to you?
Yeah, the new framework, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, called Remix. That is sort of a React full stack framework or library, maybe we should call it. I'm super curious to get my hands on that. I've been using Gatsby now for the past year and a half, and which I think I've gotten acquainted with. It feels very familiar. It feels very safe to use it. But I'm very, very curious about Remix and what can be done with that. I think they just released version 1, right?
A couple of months ago. It's very retro. It's going back to kind of older remember the whole PHP thing where you used to submit forms all the time and that kind of thing? That's Remix, right? So it's basically going back in time. It's not like nowadays we do all the JSON posting and all the JSON lifecycle and doing all the requests off a client, right? This is kind of going back a step, but I actually think it's really cool. Like when you get it, when you work with it, you're like, oh, this is refreshingly fast and cool. It kind of works. This is neat.
Yeah, we're swinging full circle. We've gone from everything on the client to back to everything on the browser or the server. And I'm sure we'll hit somewhere in the middle again at some point soon.
Yeah. We'll go all the way back, and then somebody will say 5 years from now, but we could do it all on the client. Okay. Yes.
So, Mickey, is there anything that we haven't really talked about yet? We've covered, Canvas and React. We've covered a little bit of your really interesting career path to working in web development full time. Is there anything else that you feel like we should touch on before we start to kind of wrap up and go into picks for this week?
Not that I can think of. I think we spent giving way more airtime to Svelte than React almost. but no, I think we covered it for sure.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Awesome.
Hi, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been coaching some people on starting some podcasts and in some cases just taking their career to the next level. Whether you're beginner going to intermediate going to advanced, whether you're trying to get noticed in the community or go freelance, I've been helping these folks figure out how to get in front of people, how to build relationships, and how to build their careers and max out and just go to the next level. So if you're interested in talking to me and having me help you go to the next level, go to topenddevs.com/coaching. I will give you a 1-hour free session where we can figure out what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and figure out what the next steps are. And then from there, we can figure out how to get you to the place you want to go. So once again, that's topenddevs.com/coaching.
Well, it's time to move into picks. So this is something that we think listeners would be interested in, whether it's entertainment, technical, anything else. So my pick for this week is going to be a movie that I watched recently on Netflix called Don't Look Up, which is kind of a satire of if there was a a meteorite really hurtling at Earth that was going to destroy all life on Earth, how would the current governments of the world handle it? Which is not so well. But it is really kind of an eye opener, because we see, all the discord that's currently going on in the world. And if there was something like this where everybody really needed to band together to save the Earth, could they? And it's interesting to see how probably it very well might play out, with corporations trying to get involved, different governments refusing to work together, and all the rest of the people either agreeing that it is actually happening or just choosing not to believe it. So it's got some really good actors too in it. Jennifer Aniston, Meryl Streep, or not Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep. Yeah, it's Leonardo DiCaprio, I think. So that's going to be my pick for this week. Don't Look Up. TJ, would you like to give us a pick?
Yeah, very cool. I need to check that out. It kind of reminds me of Idiocracy in a way, like the premise at least. I'm going to pick Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is a new game from the Pokemon world. It's actually, I'd say, the first Pokemon game in a really long time that I would recommend people check out that aren't already like inculcated into the Pokemon world, because it is kind of a new spin on the typical type of game that they do. It's more exploration based. It's very clearly inspired by Breath of the Wild. So it's more like out in the wild, looking for things, exploring. And I've been somewhat perhaps addicted to it over the last few days, going around and playing with my kids as well. So if you're into those sorts of games, if you like Breath of the Wild, you might want to check it out. And that's my pick.
I will have to let my daughter know. I'm sure she'll love that.
Yep.
Very cool. Jack, what do you got for us?
Mine's going to be a lot more simple. It's plastic bags. So, right. So I'm in my I'd say third week now of Marie Kondoing my life. So I'm getting rid of all the stuff, organizing, getting blah, 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 and it is life changing. And so over the past couple of days, I have gone into the dreaded cable drawer, the mess, the snake pit, USB micro A, blah, USB-C, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, how do I deal with this? Right. And so I first kind of organized them all at least into they're all the same, kind of get them all into bunches. Right. And then I used Velcro zip ties on them. And so that's cool. And then I was talking on Twitter to somebody and they're like, I just put them all into plastic bags and use a label maker and put a label on it, USB A to USB C or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that is genius. And so now I've got, I put them in a plastic bag, put them in a plastic box, and now it's done. And now if I need my USB A to USB C cable that's 6 feet or whatever, I'm in. I get it in one. It's great.
It's pretty smart, actually.
It's crazy.
Because even if you Velcro them, they still get intermingled and stuff. It's hard to keep them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because you kind of bundle certain sizes together, but even then, they're not the same size, and sometimes they're flat, and sometimes they're round. It's a mess.
Good advice. Good time to get organized or get reorganized, I guess.
Going into spring, clean your life, organize. Yeah.
But never get rid of those cables. They may still be needed.
Okay, I got rid of a bunch of USB to micro A. I had, oh my God. You guys buy them too. You do the IoT thing. That's all micro A.
It is.
And so you got to have 800 of those cables, I'm telling you.
Yeah. I have a lot of adapters too for USB-C because I run on Mac, which I hate, but you can't get away from it. Good one. Mickey, do you have anything that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So I very recently rediscovered books, fictional books. And I remembered sort of after having forgotten it for 20 years that I'm a huge fantasy nerd. So I think I read my first book this year. I finished it. And I think that's my first non-school book in 10 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what it was, I started watching this Amazon series called Wheel of Time. Have you heard about it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
With Rosamund Pike. And I just love those fantasy settings with Misty Mountains and cool women who do magic and maybe a dragon or two. I think they're really cool. So they were releasing one episode per week. And I realized that I'm way too impatient to wait like 1 week for one episode, and then to wait like another 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 pandemics for like the next season. So it's just like, I'm going to buy these books and I'm going to read them. So Wheel of Time, I think it's 13 books.
I was going to say you dove in the deep end, man, because that is quite the fantasy series.
I know. And the worst thing is, you know what I do? Like past midnight when everyone's gone to bed, I go like, it's reading time. So I just like lay on the couch and read my fantasy books. But it's so nice. So I really, and it's a really good book. I'm halfway through the second one now. It's only like 11 to go still, but they're actually really, really good.
Yeah, that is
excellent.
Very well done, very well written series. And so far the show is doing well, keeping the feeling of it. So that's a great one.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, Mickey, thanks again for coming on. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And for anybody who's listening, if you're interested in seeing more about what Mickey is writing about, his website, his Twitter handle, we'll have all of that online in our show notes so you can catch him on the flip side. But Mickey, if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to reach out?
Twitter, I think, for sure.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely have a link to your Twitter handle in the notes. And thanks once again for joining us. And we'll see everybody on the next episode of React Roundup.
See you then.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.